your president speaking. And I approve this message.
Oakland Raiders, Oakland Raiders, Oakland Raiders. Just win, baby, win, baby, win, baby. We are the Oakland Raiders, Oakland Raiders, Oakland Raiders. Just win, baby, win, baby, win, baby. Don't need no invitation. We are that Raider Nation. We rock that black and silver. We make them shake and shiver. We make them reconsider. And we still committed. So if you want a piece of this, you can come and get it.
Touchdown, touchdown. Let's throw a bomb on first down. Let's throw a bomb on every down. First we score, then we clown. Having fun, look around. Nobody loud as a Raider crowd. Nobody proud as a Raider crowd. NFL, how you like me now? We gon' do this Oakland style. Nothing but action. I'm Bo Jackson, hit the hole. Run you over, goal line. Jumping over, going crazy. Lose your soul, lose your mind in the black hole. Here's the goal, Super Bowl. And everybody here get to go.
Don't need no invitation. We are that Raider Nation. We rock that black and silver. We make them shake and shiver. We make them reconsider. And we still...
Welcome to NFL Team Breakdowns for the Oakland Raiders, of course. And they're in one of the toughest divisions, I believe, the AFC West, when you have three playoff teams. And the Chargers is slipping in while the Raiders went 4-12 this season. Really did struggle, and it was more of the QB situation. Matt Flynn was supposed to be your starter. You got him over free agency. Then you go to a Terrell Pryor that you got in the 2012 draft. He starts in the 2013 campaign. Very interesting scenario. And now it went to Matt McGloin for the other half of the season, and then Terrell Pryor got to play the last game against Denver. Kind of really interesting way to say it, but Nick, the Raiders, they struggled this year, and it's probably, it was just because they didn't have enough depth. They had a lot of guys that no one really knew, and QB situations, in my opinion, is really huge for any team.
It definitely is. I mean, there is absolutely no surprise that the Raiders are having a quarterback controversy. I mean, they've been set at that position for quite some time. Obviously, all jokes aside, they had to play with they even had Marcel Reese and Darren McFadden completing passes, according to Raiders.com. I don't understand where the heck that came from, but it's just gotten that bad for the Oakland Raiders. They have running backs and fullbacks throwing passes. Coming up into this year, a brand new quarterback controversy. Terrell Pryor no longer in town. The quarterbacks, there's only one that even threw for the Oakland Raiders last year. That's Matt McGloin. He's now the number 3 penciled-in player. And, Robert, it's not just the quarterbacks, but it's a lot of other pieces. Going into the offseason, the Raiders were looked at as one of the teams with the biggest and most widespread holes among the league. Because, listen, every position on this entire roster, it looks like needs some work.
Yeah, Nick, and their best running back this year, last year, was Rashad Jennings, and he goes to the New York Giants. And that's unfortunate to see, but when you see Rashad Jennings, he had to really carry the load with an injured Darren McFadden. And he averaged 4.5 yards per carry and had 6 touchdowns this season. I really liked Rashad Jennings on the Raiders. He brought a lot of, energy, you could say, and was really just carried that running back load. And Terrell Pryor also ran the ball a little bit as well. He had the longest rushing touchdown in football history by starting at, I think, the one. It was either at the one or I think it was a 98-yard run touchdown. That was interesting. But Pryor gets traded, goes to the Seattle Seahawks. Could become a wide receiver. Interesting scenario. But moving on, Matt McGloin had to come in, and he had 8 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. Went over 1,500 yards passing. Nick, the QBs, and, you got to feel bad for Matt Flynn here. He got the start one game and didn't look all that impressive. And gets cut immediately from Oakland. They go with Matt McGloin and does all right. He does an okay type of job. But that's what Terrell Pryor did. He didn't, to be honest, this guy had 7 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. He had double-digit interceptions and single-digit touchdowns. He was more of the running type of QB, something I don't like to see in this league. I hope it stops one day, but I know it's not. But not one of my favorite type of quarterbacks. But, man, I got to say, Darren McFadden, that was a big disappointment for the Oakland Raiders. He got injured again. He averaged 3 1/3 yards rushing, and he had 5 touchdowns. Not, he got in the end zone, but still, Rashad Jennings really had to carry that load this season. And the receiving totals, Rod Streeter, that was your big time name. Who's that? Well, that was the biggest wide receiver on this squad, and a lot of people don't really know who he is. But since I'm from the Bay Area, I kind of know this team. Rod Streeter is actually kind of a fast type of guy, and he can make some catches. For Oakland, he had 4 touchdowns this season. Then you have a Denarius Moore, who, Nick, this guy got injured a lot, and that was a problem with Oakland. They had a lot of players injured in that offense. That's why they were pretty much, I gotta say, awful this season. I felt bad for, a Terrell Pryor, Matt McGloin. You don't have much to throw to. And now they have also tight end Michael Rivera, and they also have an Andre Holmes. But Nick, I gotta say that the only good thing on this offense, you gotta say, for this squad, Marcel Reese. He's probably one of the best fullbacks in this league. He can catch, he can run, and he helped out Rashad Jennings. And when we go to the depth chart analysis, I gotta give this guy an A, because he was pretty much the captain of that offensive squad.
Yeah, you look across the board, the passing was not all too effective. Combined for the football team was a combined 17 passing touchdowns to 20 interceptions. Not going to get it done. These quarterbacks were sacked a combined 43 times, which isn't going to get it done at all in the National Football League. And when you look across the board, I mean, the running game was pretty solid. You can look at the offensive line as basically a team filled with building blocks. I mean, you talk about Donald Penn, one of the best left tackles in the game from Tampa Bay. They bring him over in a free agent contract, along with an Austin Howard that's at the right tackle spot, former Jet. And I think you look at this offensive line, and while overall maybe the receiving core decimated with injuries, running backs are questionable, and obviously the quarterbacks have been a cause for concern for about a decade now. But the Oakland Raiders have building blocks. Many people question what the Raiders are doing. Well, I think they have the means for success after what was a real successful, in my opinion, free agency period to go along with already a couple of real nice players on that offensive line.
Nick, they do have a good O-line. It's solid, but the only reason why the sack totals are so high, and you probably agree with me on this, Terrell Pryor ran out of the pocket way too much. Look how many games Matt McGloin played, and he only got sacked 6 times. Let's just remember that Matt McGloin was your pocket passer. Terrell Pryor kind of ran out of the pocket way too much, and your O-line isn't going to help you that much outside of the pocket. That's kind of your duty to move yourself to pretty much get your speed and get going.
I don't want to overall completely criticize them too, because listen, maybe it takes an extra half second or a second for guys like Streeter and Denarius Moore to get open, because this isn't one of the top flight receiving cores either. I mean, it's not like Pryor had a whole lot to work with.
That is true. Yeah, he only had a Rod Streeter. You also got a Denarius Moore, Andre Holmes, and a Michael Rivera. You also had a Marcel Reese to go with it, but I think their wide receiver core is kind of going to be an up-and-coming talent. These guys are still young, which is awesome, and they don't have to be in Oakland. I think in a couple of years you're going to see their contracts expire, and I know a lot of guys don't really know these names, but I think Rod Streeter could potentially become a really good wide receiver in this league. He just needs the right quarterback to do it. And I think Matt Schaub could be the guy.
Yeah, overall, this was what Schaub had in Houston last year was a real downer. He's still one of the better quarterbacks. He's consistent, and he's a guy that you can count on, especially coming in this season where he's basically vying for a starting job in the NFL. I mean, one more off year, and you could be looking at Schaub at potentially making reservations to the bench. And also, when you bring together some really nice pieces on that receiving core and the offense as a whole, he has a new toy to play with in former Packer James Jones, a real solid receiver up in there, and also throw in a David Osbury, who's really developing as the tight end position. and then just throw in, of course, a Darren McFadden and a Maurice Jones-Drew. Two-headed running attack should provide some huge plays. And, I mean, there's no excuse this year. Matt Schaub really has to show that he was worthy of a trade and worthy of the Raiders bringing him into the locker room because, listen, they've had quarterback problems for the longest time, and they can't afford another miscue this time with a guy who's been proven successful in the league, who's been to the playoffs in a Matt Schaub.
Well, Nick, you go back to their QB history, and I gotta say the last QB I remember is you got a Carson Palmer, who was there for Oakland. He came from Cincinnati. You had Jason Campbell. Then for some reason, he just went away. And then, I still remember, what's that quarterback that was a bust in the first round?
Jamarcus
Russell. Oh, man. That brings me back. That was
the Raiders, the worst. It's so entertaining. I want to bring this up because there has to be a segment when we talk about the Raiders on their draft history. It's been hysterical what under the last. I mean, obviously, rest in peace, Al Davis, one of the best and most renowned owners of all time in this great sport called NFL football. But some of the draft busts, just to name a few, have become extremely fun to watch. Ever since 2005, because they did have a good draft 2004 and prior, but 2005, their first round selection was Fabian Washington out of the league. 2006, Michael Huff, who's actually a real solid safety there for the Raiders. 2007, Jamarcus Russell, one of the worst draft selections of all time.
We could go on about
Darren
Jamarcus
McFadden,
Russell.
He's missed more games than he's made. Darius Hayward-Bay in 2009. I think he's on something like his third team now. 2010, Rolando McClain. He retired. 2011, they didn't even have a first-round pick, but their second was Stephen Wisniewski, who is the starter for the Raiders, but is nothing more than just an average offensive lineman. 2012, won't even going to go there. They have nothing but horrible picks, including a Tony Bergstrom who leads the pack. He's now out of the league. Then 2013, DJ Hayden. It's been hysterical, but maybe the Raiders turn it around under a new ownership and Khalil Mack, who heads the charge for the Raiders draft board.
Nick, the Raiders are just a funny team in the last couple of years, but, man, I gotta say, this squad has really just struggled to find, anything going for them the last couple of years. And Nick, I feel bad for this team in a couple of ways because, maybe it's because of management, coaching, and stuff like that. And it's hard when you have to come into when Dennis Allen, the head coach for the Raiders, has to come into a situation where he doesn't really have an established QB position. He knows his running back gets injured a lot, and the defense isn't really that solid. But there's one player I kind of want to stand out in that defense. And Nick, you probably don't know this guy, but he's going to be on the statistics board. But when you add in Nick Roach, a guy that probably was your biggest standout last season, he had over 100 tackles, 5.5 sacks, 5 tackles for loss. He had 1 interception. And Nick, a lot of people don't really know this guy, which is kind of sad because he is a big-time linebacker. And he's made some differences in some games. I remember I actually went to one Raiders game last season. My friend invited me. It was against the Tennessee Titans. And I remember Nick Roach, man, he hit hard against Chris Johnson. He wasn't going to go easy on him. And that's what I like about Nick Roach. He doesn't go easy on players. He's a hard hitter. And he can also get to the quarterback a little bit too.
Yeah, obviously this Raiders defense revamped, some free agent acquisitions, and then obviously you throw in Khalil Mack into the mix, and you got yourself a real solid core there at linebacker and a defensive line. I think the under-the-radar performance of 2014 for the Oakland Raiders will be a Lamar Woodley, who came over in a free agent contract from the Steelers. This is a player that knows how to get it done and basically wreaked havoc there with one of the better sacking teams in the league with Pittsburgh. But another player to look out for is a guy who's trying to rejuvenate what has been a somewhat diminished career as of late, Justin Tuck former New York Giant. There are a couple players to look out for, and maybe the Oakland Raiders, while their quarterback may get sacked with regularity, maybe they can figure out a way to kind of repay the punishment on the opposing quarterbacks.
Nick, the one thing I was questioning during the free agency is where's the wide receivers at? Where you could have at least gotten one more okay type of wide receiver during the free agency, but I didn't see any of that going on. So that's a concern for me, Nick. The wide receiver core and what Matt Schaub has to work with is kind of a big deal for me in that offense. But Maurice Jones-Drew is he's coming off a bad season and he's hoping to try to revamp himself. And Justin Tuck, he had 11 sacks last season. Nick, don't say that he wasn't. I wouldn't say that he had a bad year. I mean, he still got to that quarterback pretty damn fine. And then Donald Penn is a good acquisition for this squad when you have And here's where I kind of look at it. When you get a Carlos Rogers and a Terrell Brown, you take him from the 49ers. Let's remember Carlos Rogers is old. Terrell Brown can still play. He is actually I actually liked him when he played against NFC West teams. He was, he's a guy that can, he's a tough guy and he can make a lot of pass deflections happen. Maybe he's not the interceptions type of, he's maybe not the interception totals type of guy, but he'll have a lot of pass deflections, and I think he's going to help out a DJ Hayden. He's dealt with injuries and he's kind of struggled his rookie year. So I'm hoping Terrell Brown can make an impact for that Oakland Raiders cornerback position.
Yeah, this is a team that is trying to finally get some production out of that. I mean, we look at the Oakland Raiders as a team that hasn't won more than 5 games since 2002, and it's been a combined 13 years that they haven't had a above 500 record. This has just been a team that has really tried to, and they have had solid defenses in the past. If there's been a weakness, by far and away, it's the offensive side. But if they are going to fix what was a somewhat average defense last year, they're going to have to do it with the acquisitions that they got at the defensive line. I think what really helps a team like Seattle get over the hump to get to the Super Bowl is to have a dominant defensive line, which allows the remaining of your maybe somewhat weaker linebackers, or maybe the weakness of your team being another position, but defensive line always gives you opportunities. It's the same with the offensive line. I think winning in the trenches helps you get ahead in football games. And I think the Raiders, not only do they understand that philosophy, but they put it to work and have signed some really solid players around the league to this Raider team. I mean, they had the most cap room in the offseason to spend, and they went shopping. Boy, did the Raiders go ahead and get some key acquisitions in-house.
And Nick, my bad, they actually did go on free agency and get a wide receiver. They got ex-Packer James Jones.
Yeah, well, they got one, but I understand.
It helps
when
a little
Decker's
bit.
on the table, when you got other players.
They got Greg Little, too.
Yeah.
They gotta get Greg Little. He's kind of old, but he's not too bad. But, the rest of those guys that's another story. Then you got David Austin-Berry and Michael Rivera down in the tight end position. They're still going to struggle a little bit, but what I like about this squad is I think McFadden and Maurice Jones-Drew are going to be an okay type of duo, but what I've heard from the Oakland Raiders is they're going to actually run the ball a lot more, which I don't know. If you really want to risk Darren McFadden getting hurt, then be my guest. But Maurice Jones-Drew, you're going to have to rely on him a lot this season if you're going to run that ball. And he didn't have a great season, but maybe this is his turnaround. Maybe it's a turnaround for Oakland. I know our records won't be too high, Nick, but I still think the Raiders could get a couple of wins.
That's true.
They are in a tough division
last year, and Vegas actually has them at 5-11, and that might even be a little low. There's a lot of hope in this Oakland Raider team this year as a squad that could maybe best case scenario contend for a 500 record. I mean, listen, this is no joke who they have brought into the lineup. These are real playmakers. Last year, the Raiders didn't exactly have a receiving core, but now I think is the very first time that they not only have a receiving core worth looking at instead of putting 8, 9, 10 guys in the box to blitz the quarterback. and that may have contributed to the additional sacks. Maybe opposing defenses, there's only one thing that the Raiders at least did okay at, and that was running the football, and that was probably why they saw a lot of 8- and 9-man fronts. So what the Raiders did is they not only solidified an offensive line that can handle that pressure, but added an extra receiver. James Jones, I think, provides a perfect security blanket because I don't think now's the time for Matt Schaub to add down the field weapons. He had enough of that with Andre Johnson. The reason why Johnson provided such good numbers for Schaub over the years was because he was reliable. He always caught the football and was a superb route runner. That's what you get out of James Jones. And I think, now don't call me on this, but I think the Raiders are going to become more of a conservative type of a football team offensively under the lineage of Greg Olson, the offensive coordinator. Because it just looks to me like these targets that the Raiders have, these are more short to intermediate caliber receivers.
They don't really have that elite type of wide receiver, but remember, Andre Johnson is on the market. Can the Raiders maybe get him? That would be really interesting to watch out for.
Would.
I think the Raiders have a good shot, though. I mean, yes, maybe you have to get rid of some picks, but, hey, if you have Matt Schaub down there and you're going to have Andre Johnson, imagine that chemistry. I think the Raiders might have a good shot at getting Andre Johnson. If Matt Schaub wants to say something, he's on the market right now. Hey, why don't the Raiders try to take him?
That's true. I'm actually going to look up right now how much cap room the Raiders have, and basically you got to believe Andre Johnson's looking for about $10 million because he's one of the best receivers in the game right now. So based off of SpotTrack.com, the Oakland Raiders still, there are teams that are in the negative right now, and what's really scary is that basically the whole AFC West is dealing with that problem, except for the Oakland Raiders, who actually, according to this website, they rank number 14 and have, you guessed it, $10 million to spend. So Andre Johnson could come to town. It's obviously a lofty proposition. The Patriots can win right now. The Niners can, and they have a little extra cap room where they can go ahead and jostle and help get a guy like Andre Johnson in there who would take him over the top. But still, the Raiders, they're a team on the rise, and Johnson may find Matt Schaub too good of a quarterback to pass up.
And let's also remember their first-round draft pick, and I think this guy will not be a bust. I think this is actually a solid linebacking core. When you add a Khalil Mack, he has the talent. And Nick, I'm going to be honest with you, he's a difference maker right off the bat. He's going to be at the strong side linebacker, and he pretty much, Nick, they have a lot of veterans on that team. He adds that youth that defense needs, and I think Khalil Mack is really going to help them out. And, I'm kind of glad that this worked out because Khalil Mack was pretty much a big need for them. Yes, you could say Kevin Burnett and Nick Roach were already your wide receivers, and you drafted a C.O. Moore last year, but C.O. Moore wasn't going to cut it for the Raiders. I'm glad Khalil Mack is on the Raiders now, and I think that linebacking core is, that's gonna be a scary linebacking core. And Nick, Khalil Mack forced 16 fumbles last year in the NCAA, and that was the most in NCAA history. So let's see what happens. I think he's gonna be making running backs drop that football and some quarterbacks. I can't wait to watch this guy. Because this guy, he's going to bring a lot of energy.
It's a very rare commodity to have a guy with that caliber go to a school like a University of Buffalo, where not many people even heard of it until he was on the draft market. And Khalil Mack, taken 5th overall, many consider that to be somewhat of a steal, and I think I'm the same way. But not only is this maybe one of the better draft picks of the last decade for the Raiders, but I think what pays huge dividends for Oakland right off the bat is that Khalil Mack is used to this situation. At the University of Buffalo, he was the unquestioned best player on the team. If you put him in Alabama's lineup, you don't even know if he's the best linebacker on the squad. So now when you put Mack into this lineup, he's obviously, even though they have some playmakers, he still can walk in and be potentially the number one linebacker. Khalil Mack, one of the hardest working guys of the draft. especially among the first-round talent. And listen, Khalil Mack can simply get it done. And when you add guys like Justin Tuck, Lamar Woodley to anchor a good defensive line, Khalil Mack will have extra opportunities to get a hold of the football, or at least the running back for that matter, during the 2014 season.
And a lot of people are really excited to watch him play. And actually, a couple quotes here from some players. Matt Schaub, you can see the impact that he can create. You can see his physical gifts and his ability to shed blockers and be able to disrupt the passer and the timing of the route. You can really see the progression and the development. And then this is what Donald Penn said. He said, Khalil is a special athlete. I can tell by watching some of his movements and the way that he can put his foot in the ground and change direction for him to be doing that as a defensive end. He looks like he's a defensive back. And for a guy that size to be doing that, I think he's going to get a lot of sacks laying it down because he has a motor on him that is relentless. Wow,
and
Nick.
they're going to need that because the Raiders haven't had a player last year with anything over 6 sacks, and that was Lamar Houston. He's no longer in town. So the next best pass rusher was a Nick Roach. Looks like the Raiders had one position to improve, if any. That was the linebacker position, and they certainly did that. And boy, how lucky were they to have Khalil Mack fall right to them. They didn't have to do anything to claim one of the best linebacker prospects of the draft.
You gotta be happy. I think Khalil Mack he has the size, and he can get to that quarterback, and I think he's gonna, Nick, if I gotta guess now, I think he's gonna force 7 to 8 fumbles this season. I think in the NFL, I think he's gonna go against Jamal Charles. He's gonna be going against Ryan Matthews and Monte Ball for the Denver Broncos because they don't have they don't have a Keyshawn Moreno anymore. So they're going to be relying on their second-year player, Monte Ball. But, Nick, to be honest, like I'm looking at the running backs in the AFC West. I mean, I think Jamal Charles is the only elite one out of that running back, out of that whole AFC West. He's the only elite running back. So I think Khalil Mack can really help out in that department. And I know Jamal Charles is going to be. I think Jamal Charles is going to be the test. If he can stop Jamal Charles, I think Khalil Mack is going to be a great athlete, and he could be the franchise player of the Oakland Raiders.
Yeah, maybe of the future. We got to pump the brakes here, though, real quick, because it's definitely a steep learning curve for a defensive player to make it in the NFL. I think offensively, it's a heck of a lot easier to step in day one and play in the NFL. I mean, even a D. Milliner has his early struggles. So Mack may have the same fate, but this is a player who, I mean, I don't care where you put him, what NFL team he's on. He doesn't play quarterback, so he's not going to get pounded and not get used to it. But with Khalil Mack, he just looks to be a future 10-time Pro Bowler, a really good all-pro player for the Raiders or for any team that is willing to be with him for the long haul. This seems to be, if there's any player who would be a future Hall of Famer in this draft class, it would be Khalil Mack.
I think that's a really good point there. I think when you look at it, his rookie year, he could struggle a little bit. I think in the beginning it's going to happen, but towards the end of the season, I think he's going to find his groove, and I think he's going to get over 70, maybe 7 to 80 tackles this season. Dang. Watch out for Khalil Mack.
Sounds like you know a little bit more than I thought about this draft, or at least with Khalil Mack.
I like Khalil Mack. I don't know about you, Nick, but I got high expectations for this guy. I think the Raiders might have hit the gold mine with Khalil Mack. So
It took 10 years to do it.
It took when you have Jamarcus Russell, that was supposed to be your gold mine. It didn't really plan out for you the way that you thought it would be, but
yeah.
I don't know what's up with that guy anyway. What is he doing? Chilling somewhere probably? He's probably listening to this right now. He's like, you guys are being so mean to me right now. I'm like, you were like the biggest first round bust in NFL history. But
Yeah,
how
Roberts
much games did they
sure.
win? They only won like 2 games, right?
Yeah, which is 2 more than any of us have ever won in the NFL.
That's true. Yeah, you can say that.
Just throwing that out there. But hey, just one final point here. I'm sure The fans are anxious. They are just dying to listen to this depth chart recap. But one other point that I want to make here, and listen, this isn't exactly something that even Raider fans would call their biggest strength, but a guy that I have grown to love for the Raiders, or at least grown to appreciate, because the Chargers just do not, I'm a Chargers fan, do not seem to have an answer to. It's this secondary led by a Tyvon Branch, who's one of the better safeties in the game, even though he's not really recognized as such. This is a guy that can not only provide very good run support, but every year he comes in and provides some huge plays for the Raiders against the pass. I mean, last year, Branch, he didn't exactly light up the interceptions board, but he still was just a guy that we always had to look out for, given San Diego's inability to even beat the Raiders. Whenever we had issues, it was trying to pass the ball deep down the field. The Raiders just would not allow it, and it was led by Tyvon Branch, and also bringing into the lineup maybe one of the better safeties in the last decade, Charles Woodson.
And Charles Woodson, he re-signed actually a 1-year deal with the Oakland Raiders. Nick, he's getting old, but I think another year for the Oakland Raiders is not a bad idea. But
yeah, this may be his last year, though. I mean, after this, he may be a guy that's just trying too hard. He'll be like probably a Chad Ochocinco or a Terrell Owens. He may say, hey, listen, I can still play. Even now, I don't even think he's that. I mean, he's probably good enough to be a starter, but that's about it.
Nick, well, we'll find out if the Oakland Raiders can really compete in that AFC West. But fans, I know you've been waiting, and we're going to get down to it, the depth chart. Let's start with the quarterback position. You have newly acquired Matt Schaub from the Houston Texans. Behind him right now is Derek Carr from Fresno State, one of the draft picks in 2014 for the Oakland Raiders. And then you have Matt McGloin, who played in 7 games last season, had 8 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. Nick, it's hard when you have a guy that, only had 1 bad year. And Matt Schaub, I think he's going to bounce back a little bit. I wouldn't say it's a C because it's not development. They did go out and get this guy. I'm going to give him a B- for Matt Schaub.
Yeah, same here. Because I love Derek Carr out of Fresno State. I think he can develop and become a starter for Oakland in the future. We've said that about other Raider quarterbacks, but if there was one quarterback outside of the first 2 rounds that I really like, it's a Derek Carr, a guy that could develop into not only a starter, but a reliable starter, like a Matt Schaub in the NFL. Obviously, way ahead of ourselves, but Oakland still has a problem at the quarterback position, but probably better than last year.
But, Nick, I want to ask you this question about the QB situation from last season. The Raiders get a Matt Flynn. They said, Terrell Pryor, you're back up. You're going to stay there. You're not coming up and starting. What happens towards the end of the preseason? Who wins the job? Terrell Pryor. Did Dennis Allen make the right decision for that squad last season?
I think whether he went with one or the other, the Raiders were going to struggle at the quarterback position. It's just one of those deals where are you going to 2 young guys, 2 people who will take a beating, and they don't really have a whole lot to work with. We're apples and oranges. Both of them probably would have performed right around the same. I mean, statistically, they did end up right around the same, McGloin and Pryor.
That is true, but I'm just saying I don't know what would happen if they actually started a Matt Flynn. That would have been really interesting to watch.
Right.
Would you agree Matt Flynn would? Matt Flynn struggled.
Matt Flynn's kind of one of those average quarterbacks too. Matt Flynn and Matt Castle, I think, are 1A and 1B, to be honest with you.
But do you think Matt Flynn deserved the job that year?
Hey, listen, in the NFL, nothing is deserved. You gotta take it. And apparently during the off season, Terrell Pryor earned it. And listen, maybe you don't like his unconventional play, but this guy led the Raiders in yards per attempt, and this guy also scored the longest play, I believe, in Raiders history, correct? Or at least of the season.
In NFL history.
Terrell Pryor, 576 yards on the ground. Matt Flynn may be an average quarterback, and same with Pryor, both as throwers. But as a runner, Pryor was second to none in that Raider lineup.
Well, that's interesting. Oh, I just want to know your opinion on it because it was something that was really, that really stood out to me. But nevertheless,
last year's last year. But I will say this year, the guy that should be starting is Matt Schaub. No way should Derek Carr be thinking about a starting job right now in case of injury. Right? That's about the only way. Because Schaub has got to take the fronts, take the load, the beating, until the Raiders figure out a way to get themselves a pretty good wide receiver and one of those reliable targets for an Oakland Raider team to succeed.
Interesting to watch out for, but also something interesting to look out for is Darren McFadden going to have a comeback season. That's always been the question almost every year. And also a Maurice Jones-Drew who really still rushed for 803 yards. Not too bad, and he had 5 touchdowns, but he did have 234 carries. Let's remember that. Nick, I gotta say, Maurice Jones-Drew, I think this guy's got to carry the load for the running back position. McFadden is going to get hurt, as we always say every year, and they only brought McFadden. They wanted to bring McFadden on because they couldn't get Rashad Jennings. That was kind of hard because I think Rashad Jennings would have been a great pickup for the Raiders. Would have been a great re-signing to keep and let McFadden go somewhere else and let that team deal with his problems. But Darren McFadden is back in Oakland once again, and they have Maurice Jones-Drew. Nick, I gotta say,
we gave Rashad Jennings, who's now a New York Giant, we gave him a B-, because they actually don't really have anyone else behind him. They have David Wilson behind him and Andre Williams. So I think I'm going to give this running back position a C+. I mean, McFadden, we don't even know if he'll last until week 1. This guy may hurt himself like a Sean Lee.
Maybe it's like week 4 of preseason and tears his ACL and he's out for the year. All you got is Jones-Drew left. Could happen.
He's been washed up. I mean, love him to death. He's carried the ball too many times. I mean, Jacksonville is one of those teams where careers go to die, and Maurice Jones-Drew is one of the recipients of that Jacksonville curse, if you will. Madden may have a curse. Jacksonville definitely has a curse. Careers go to die there.
Could happen to Blake Bortles, but we'll find that out. But Nick, I gotta say, I gotta give him a C. This is something you gotta really develop. The running back position, you don't have a consistent running back. You always have to go with someone different. Rashad Jennings just became an up-and-coming type of player and made himself known in Oakland. And got a good deal in New York, not too bad. And I don't think Jones-Drew and McFadden aren't gonna really get the job done in Oakland. So give him a C. Let's move on to the wide receiver position. You got newly acquired James Jones, and he had 59 catches for 817 yards. He had 3 touchdowns. Then you have Denarius Moore, who only played 13 games last season, had 46 receptions for 695 yards. Saw the red zone 5 times. And then you have a Rod Streeta, who had 888 yards. He was the best wide receiver on the squad and had 4 touchdowns. And then you move on to a Greg Little, who came from actually the Cleveland Browns. He had 41 catches for 465 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then last and not least, Andre Holmes, who only played 10 games. A lot of injuries to this squad, let's remember that. Had 25 catches for 431 yards and a touchdown. Nick, there isn't a top wide receiver. I think Andre Johnson would be a perfect pick for Oakland when you can get a matchup and Andre Johnson working together. Johnson wants to get traded. That's been the reports. And it's going to be happening very, very soon. Seemingly 4 teams are interested. I don't know the 4. Nick, if you can look that up, that would be great. But I got to say, with Matt Schaub, I don't think they're going to be too bad. I think I'm going to give him I think I'll give him a B-. I think Rod Streeter really brings that youth to that group. And Rod Streeter was your leading type wide receiver. He stayed healthy all season. Give him that. And, James Jones isn't a bad player, but he's an okay type of guy. Denarius Moore gets hurt way too much. And Andre Holmes needs to stay healthy. Greg Little is a guy that you just picked up, didn't have a great season with Cleveland. But still, I think Greg Little adds a little bit of depth to that. Adds a little depth to the wide receiver core.
Yeah, I'm still looking to see some of the teams, but for the sake of this conversation, there are. It looks like one of the teams that Andre Johnson is looking for is the Oakland Raiders. What a surprise! The Patriots, Browns, and Raiders are the three teams that are realistically in the running for him that Andre is interested in. But for the sake of this conversation, James Jones, Rod Streeter, and Denarius Moore, the starters, going to give that unit a C+. Just don't know if I'm all that convinced at the moment whether this receiving core is good, but I mean, overall, James Jones does improve a receiving core that had its struggles last year, and expect him to come up and make plays as a potential number 1/number 2 target.
All right, let's move on to the tight end position. You have a David Osbury from USC, and you have Michael Rivera last season, who played all 16 games, 38 receptions for 407 yards and 4 touchdowns. Nick, I gotta give him a C because this tight end position, it's gonna struggle, and that wide receiver core isn't gonna help out either. Matt Schaub is gonna have a lot of problems with his wide receiver core and tight end position.
Yeah, overall, I give him a B-. I love a Michael Rivera. I think he can come in and make a pretty solid impact for them, but still, Matt Schaub, whoever's playing quarterback, the receiving threats aren't one to be scared of if you're an opposing defense. It may be a little tough pickings there for this quarterback, especially early on, to try and get used to these new receiving targets.
All right, Nick, let's move on to that O-line. They have newly acquired Donald Penn. He's going to be starting at the left tackle position. Then you have left guard Khalif Barnes. Then you have Stefan Wananowski, who is your center. Then you have a Kevin Booth. And he played all 16 games last season. Newly acquired Austin Howard to replace Jared Valdir. Nick, I gotta say this O-line, they got some newly acquired guys. I think this is probably the best grade I'm gonna give for the Raiders and their offense. I'm gonna give them a B. They're a consistent type of O-line. I think Donald Penn is gonna bring a lot to the table.
Yeah, I give him a B+. I love a Donald Penn. Obviously not the same production that you're going to get out of a Jared Valdir for a new Austin Howard who's going to be playing right tackle, but you still got to love what you're getting out of Khalif Barnes and Kevin Booth, the two guards. Also throw in draft pick Gabe Jackson. Look out for him to be a potential 6th man of the offensive line, a rotational player who can play both guard and center. Maybe throw him in at tackle if you have some concerns there. This is a team that offensively, luckily for Schaub, for James Jones, for the running backs, for anyone really, that offensive line is pretty dang good.
It's not too bad. It's the best thing for their offense right now, and they're keeping that pretty consistent down there. But let's move on to the defensive side of the ball. You have former Pittsburgh Steeler LaMarr Woodley, 11 games last season, 36 tackles, 5 sacks, and 1 fumble recovery. You have Pat Sims coming back, who had 54 tackles and 2 sacks. Then you have an Antonio Smith, who had 30 tackles and 5 sacks. Then you have Justin Tuck, newly acquired free agent from the New York Giants. 63 tackles and 11 sacks and 1 interception. Nick, I gotta say, I like the defensive end positions. I think those are the most impressive. But, the tackles position, all I gotta say, I think Antonio Smith, he's not bad. He can get to the quarterback. He's got to improve, though. Something the Raiders need to do. I'm going to give him a B because I think Justin Tuck and LaMarr Woodley are really going to carry that defensive line.
I'm going to give him a B+. Antonio Smith as well should be a solid defensive tackle for them. I don't know. I'm just a fan of what the Raiders did on the defensive side. They acquired pass rushing specialists, but maybe a Pat Sims could help anchor that team and run support as well.
All right, Nick, let's move on to the linebacking core. When you look at it, you got newly acquired Khalil Mack starting at the strong side linebacker. Love the pick. Then you got Nick Roach, who led your team in tackles and sacks last season. Well, actually, Lamar Houston led in sacks last season, but since he's gone, you can technically say Nick Roach led your team in sacks. Then you have Kevin Burnett, who had 105 tackles, 2.5 sacks, and interception on fumble recovery. Nick, I actually really like this linebacking core. I think it's going to be a tough linebacking core to go through from Oakland. I think I really like what they did with Khalil Mack. Khalil Mack was probably one of the best pickups you could have gotten, and I'm actually going to give him a B+.
Same here. Love what they're doing at the linebacker position. Look out, a player to watch out for is a Nick Roach, who's finally coming into his own with the Raiders. Led his team in tackles from a season ago. Also, he snagged an interception. Should be fun to watch for the Oakland Raiders.
And Nick, a lot of people don't know this guy, but I think he's going to maybe even get 125 tackles next season. I think Kevin Burnett with him is actually a good player too. Got to kind of watch out for. And I think, Nick, when you look at it, I think Kevin Burnett could be my under-the-radar type of player on the defensive side of the ball. But let's move on to the cornerback position. You had a struggling DJ Hayden, only played 8 games last season, had 26 tackles and an interception. Then you have newly acquired Terrell Brown, came from the Niners, played 13 games, 32 tackles, and 2 fumble recoveries. As I said, isn't the guy that can get the interceptions, but can have a lot of pass deflections. Then you move on to a Carlos Rogers, played all 16 games, but injured himself actually during the playoffs, and that was a big concern, but had 2 interceptions. DJ Hayden, to me, this guy I think he's going to be a bust because of his injuries. A lot of people say that too, and I agree with them. I don't think this guy is going to be that great. I think Terrell Brown and Carlos Rogers are going to be really carrying that side of the ball, but Nick, I got to give this core, I got to give him a C because there's room of improvement. When you look at Carlos Rogers and Terrell Brown, they are getting old, and DJ Hayden is just struggling with injuries.
Yeah, I'm actually going to give him a C+. Remember, this is a unit that both cornerbacks and safeties only combined for 7 interceptions the entire season. There were 9 total, and 2 of them came by the linebackers. So overall, as a unit, this is a team that struggles to get the takeaways and, frankly, sometimes even struggles to just stop opposing wide receivers. It's up to the safeties, which I believe are the strength of this team, which has really helped save what has been some pretty sad cornerback play with the DJ Hayden not even in the lineup and a couple other guys that aren't exactly playing up to par, Robert.
Yeah, they're not playing up to par. And DJ Hayden, the Oakland Raiders were high on this guy because you thought that maybe he wouldn't be injured, maybe the injuries wouldn't happen anymore. Well, they're coming back, they're haunting you. Maybe that first-round pick could be a potential bust. But we'll find out this season. But let's move on to this free safety position. You go on to a veteran, Charles Woodson, who could potentially have his last year in the NFL. He had 97 tackles, 2 sacks, 1 interception, 2 fumble recoveries, and a touchdown last season. Then you talk about a Tyvon Branch, who actually didn't really play a lot last season. Only played 2 games, 5 tackles, and a sack. And that's also another injury on the defensive side, something the Raiders struggled with almost every game. That's why they lost, just because of injuries. It was sad to see, but I think if Branch is healthy, I think I got to give this unit, I think I'm going to give him a B. I think they're consistent. I can't give him a B+, Nick. Charles Woodson is going into his last year. He is getting older. And I think Branch is actually going to have a breakout type of season.
Yeah, I'm going to give this unit about a B too. Charles Woodson, former Raider and Green Bay Packer. He's now going to be 37 years old. Not exactly, he's pretty long in the tooth there, and it may show, but I think this Raider team still is pretty good at that safety position.
Nick, who else thought of retirement on the Oakland Raiders? Actually, Maurice Jones-Drew. Interesting fact, just because of last season, he really struggled, and he didn't know if he could really help out this team.
What's interesting is that maybe he will retire, but, maybe Sebastian Janikowski might retire. He's getting up there in age as well.
Yeah, but kickers could stay forever. But special teams, let's move on to Marquette King, who's actually, I believe, is a really good punter in this league. He had 84 punts. His longest is 66. He averaged 48.9. And
That's really good.
yeah, I know, right? He's a good punter. A lot of people don't know that. That's kind of sad to see. I actually really like the special teams unit, the kicker and the punter. And then you move on to Sebastian Janikowski. Nick, this guy struggled last season. He went 21 for 30. He actually blew the game for against the Tennessee Titans. They could have beat Tennessee. Sebastian Janikowski, I believe, missed 2 field goals that game and didn't really help him out. He went 21 for 30 this season, but as long as it was 53 yards. And then you also have as your kick returner Taiwan Jones, and then Greg Jenkins as your punt returner. I gotta say, I'm gonna give these guys a B minus.
A B minus. Gonna give him an A minus, dude. I just really love what you get out of a Marquette King.
I'm saying Marquette King is leading that charge. Sebastian Janikowski really struggled last season. Nick, I don't know if you're high or not, but you're not really looking at that. He went 21 for 30 this season, 70%.
He should have a comeback season because he's very talented. And then Marquette King is, I mean, we're talking maybe the Pro Bowl punter for the AFC next year. This guy knows how to get it done.
He does, and I actually, Marquette King, I believe, is like top 3 punters in this league. But I gotta say, Nick, this is Sebastian Janikowski needs to turn it around this season for Oakland. He could have won a couple games for Oakland. He just missed 9 field goals this season. That was a struggle for them.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, even with those, you still are getting a pretty solid overall special teams unit. There's something to be said about a punter that can pin a team inside their own 10-yard line, and Marquette King did that with regularity. And don't forget about Taiwan Jones, the return man. He has one of the top of speed bursts in the NFL. We're talking Taiwan Jones, one of the fastest 40s coming in. And you got to believe that Raiders team, they were ready to bring him in, and they certainly did.
All right, and then let's move on to the coaching staff. You got head coach Dennis Allen. He's heading into his 2nd year in Oakland. And Nick, I gotta say, Dennis Allen, he's got a tough job, especially with a team that struggled last season and really had to make some decisions about his QBs. And I think he handled it very well. And he doesn't have a lot to work with, so you really got to say Renji McKenzie's got to do something down there. He's got to buy some more players, and that's what he did this season. So, I think Dennis Allen is, trying to revamp this whole team, and it's not looking too bad. I think Matt Schaub has a good season. I think this team's going in the right direction. I like Dennis Allen. I think he's a good coach, and he's just got a tough job, and Renji McKenzie's getting him players. I think I'm gonna give him a B plus.
I mean,
maybe I'm a little too high on that.
The Raiders haven't had a whole lot of talent, but I'm going to give them about a B minus personally. Still, the coaching staff, you got to be able to deal with things like injuries, disappointments. I don't know if they've exactly done that.
Okay, but tell me about their depth. That's the only thing that's okay. I understand that. Yes, they have a lot of stars that get injured, which that hurts the team. But they don't get the Oakland Raiders don't have depth, which doesn't really help them out either. I think that's something that the Raiders gotta, something they needed to address over the offseason.
Well, we can take the AFC West, for instance. I think Kansas City last year and the Oakland Raiders last year, they didn't have the exact same roster, but it was relatively similar. And the difference between a Dennis Allen-led team and an Andy Reid-led team is, I think, the difference between 11-5 and 4-12. Obviously, Andy Reid didn't win you 7 games. I mean, they had a better quarterback situation. The defense was slightly better. But the point is, I mean, that wasn't a team. That wasn't that much more talented of a team. I just think overall, Oakland, they got themselves a solid coach, but if they could replace him with someone better, I think the Raiders would love to have a guy like a Lovie Smith or somebody or a number of these other coaches that were on the market, and the Raiders never pursued him.
Dennis Allen was potentially going to be fired, but it didn't happen. So, seemingly they want to keep Dennis Allen there. Let's see what happens. And Nick, I know this is probably going to be our favorite part of the show, but Well, we're going to get down to the NFL schedule, but Nick, what's your final thoughts about the Oakland Raiders?
The offense rounds out in about a B-, defense a B, which, as you could expect, a B is just average. That's if you get a B across the board, typically you're gonna, based off of our predictions, get about an 8-8 record. But I mean, listen, the Oakland Raiders, they have themselves some players that can win, and the offensive line, along with the defensive line, scored our highest and should be units to look out for. So when you take a look at the tough AFC West, though, how they play in between the trenches can help them win some of those marquee games.
And Nick, let's get down that NFL team schedule. Let's cue the music. Nick, I know you got the stats written down, and let's move on to Week 1. It's going to be at New York.
Week number 1, both of us think that the Raiders start off the season with a loss.
Well, it's an interesting way to start off against the New York Jets, but you could struggle. And let's move on to Week 2, and we actually get to predict this one. Nick, I think they get the win over Houston. I think this is a veteran team that is going to defeat a team that's really struggling. I think the defense could come up huge.
I think Houston's a pretty good team as well, though. And while they don't have a Matt Schaub, I think the Texans figure out a way defensively to get it done. Raiders start the year 0-2.
0-2 for the Oakland Raiders. Let's move on to Week 3 at New England. Nick, I'm actually, considering what you said before this show, I'm actually going to give them the win. I think the Raiders have a good shot against New England. Could give them a run for their money this season.
The Patriots are typical slow starters out of the gate, and with New England and Oakland, they have played extremely tough, hard-fought games. The Raiders always match up extremely well, and, typical Patriots fashion, I think the Raiders get it done. Even though it's in New England, the surprise curveball of the season, the Raiders win their first game in impressive fashion.
Let's go to Week 4. It's going to be at home versus Miami. Nick, I think when you look at it, Miami is ranked actually the second worst team in the NFL. If you look at it, you look at statistics, I think the Raiders actually might have a better team. I give them the win versus Miami.
Same here. It's at home, the Black Hole, Miami, even though they went 7-9, 8-8, they still have their fair share of struggles. Miami takes a step back in the AFC this year, and the Raiders move forward. I think it's back-to-back wins for the Men in Black.
All right, Nick, let's move on. We got Week 5 of the bye, and tell us Week 6 through 8 as we already predicted.
Week number 6, both of us think the Raiders lose the first game of the season, or first game of the 2-game series against the Chargers. And then week number 7 and 8, I think that they win back-to-back games versus the Cardinals and at the Browns. Meanwhile, Robert thinks it's 3 straight losses out of the bye week. A loss to the Chargers, then a loss to the Cardinals, and cap it off with a loss at the Browns.
Then you're at Week 9 at Seattle. Nick, that's going to be a tough game. When you're going against Seattle and you don't have a wide receiver core, and I don't know how the Raiders are going to win that one. They lose.
Same here. I think the Raiders just not good enough. Seattle trying to win home field advantage, and they prove why they're so dominant there in Quest.
All right, Week 10 versus Denver. Nick, I got to say, when you're going against the Denver Broncos, but this is at home. And Nick, I might actually give them the win here. I think when you're at home, and I think momentum's going your side, the fans are crazy, so let's remember that. And I think the fans help them get the win on this side.
I think the Raiders lose to the Broncos, even though it's at home. Oakland, not typically a strong finisher, and I think they begin what is going to be a wild tailspin out of control. They lose 2 straight games going into Week 11.
All right, Nick, let's move on. We have Week 11 through 13 already predicted.
Yeah, Week 11, I think, is another loss at the San Diego Chargers. Robert, you agree with me. Week number 12, it's home against the Chiefs. We think Kansas City's taking a step backwards. So both Robert and I think that the Raiders do win in week number 12 against Kansas City. And week 13 at the Rams, both of us agree it's a loss for the Raiders.
Oh, Nick, week 14. Last time the Niners and the Raiders played was a preseason game. Guess who the quarterback was? Jamarcus Russell. That's how long it's been since the Raiders and the Niners have played since that incident. was at San Francisco, and pretty much half the stadium got kicked out of the game. But Nick, I gotta say that the Raiders are gonna get a loss at home, and I don't know how that game's gonna turn out, especially fan-wise. Is someone gonna get shot or something? There's gonna be a ton of fights going on in Oakland.
Yeah, bring the police, bring whoever you need, because
bring the military.
Some serious help to beat the Niners. I give them the loss.
Nick, to be honest, Week 14, that's gonna be the scariest game in NFL history. That's all I gotta say.
Week 15 is going to be scary for Oakland, too. We predicted, both Robert and I, that the Raiders lose at the Kansas City Chiefs. And for both Robert and I, it's 3 straight losses for the Men in Black.
Nick, I gotta say, they're not going to end out the season very well. As Week 16 and 17, I give them back-to-back losses. I think Buffalo might actually pull one out, and maybe, because, I gotta give Buffalo a win once in a while. I think Buffalo is going to get the win here. They're not Denver. The Denver Broncos are going to beat them up.
I actually think that the Raiders will play the Broncos very well, but it will be in a losing effort. Week 16, though, I do give the Raiders the win. I think that Buffalo, despite being very good, the Raiders are a tough, hard-nosed football team, which means that Robert finishes out his predictions with a 5-11 record, while I think the Raiders are able to snag up 6 wins despite 10 losses. Still, a really viable portion of that AFC playoff picture. They end up losing late, which does hurt their case. But overall, look for Oakland to pull off some pretty surprising victories. And week number 3, fellas, at the New England Patriots, don't be surprised if Oakland pulls out a monumental upset.
I think New England's going to be very disappointed to lose that game. But, Nick, I said before the show I was going to give them 4 wins. I give them 5. I got the 5 wins in. I'm happy. I'm happy tonight. I gave them the 5.
Yeah, well, you gave them a win versus the Denver Broncos. They pull off 1 upset at the Patriots, but 2
could happen.
Of that
could happen. Linebacking core could get to Peyton Manning.
Yeah.
See what happens. Nick Roach and Khalil Mack.
And I could win the lottery.
You could win the lottery. You never know.
No, I get it. I get it, though. The Raiders do play the Broncos very well. So it's an interesting proposition, but I think we all can agree that the Raiders are not going above 500 this year. This just is not a good enough football team. But still, look out for the Raiders to be on the rise. If there are maybe, I would say, among 3 teams in the AFC that could rise, one of them are the Oakland Raiders. Also include a team like the Titans under Ken Wisenhunt, and then another team just taking a real quick thought, maybe the Pittsburgh Steelers off a comeback year. Mike Tomlin's one of the best at what he does. But overall, Oakland, don't expect them to lose as many games as last year. This is a real football team.
Yeah, this team will get 5 wins. I mean, though, I think they're going to get one more win than last season. Not too bad. I think this team, though, is heading into a veteran leadership type of team, and I don't think it's going to work out in the long run. I think, you gotta do something in 2 to 3 years against a tough AFC West. I think, actually, they're going to come up a little bit. I think Kansas City Chiefs fall a little bit next season. Well, I mean, not in 2014, but 2015. I think the Chiefs might struggle a little bit. But, Nick, I want to give you some stat lines here from games in their AFC West opponents. Week 3 was Monday Night Football against Denver Broncos. They lost 37-21. Then they play against San Diego, and that was like the latest game in football history. They pulled that one out 27-17. Then they played Week 6 at Kansas City. They lost 24-7. Then you move on to, you move all the way down to Week 15. Versus Kansas City at home, you lose 56-31. That was pretty much because of Jamal Charles. Then you go to Week 16 at San Diego. San Diego got their revenge. 126-13. Pretty much in crucial moments where the Chargers really had to get the win and to keep themselves in playoff hopes.
I think the Raiders play their complete games against the Broncos, and they really, really struggle against the Kansas City Chiefs. They also play very well against San Diego over the last few years.
Well, they also lost to Denver Week 17, 34-14.
Yeah, I still think Oakland plays very well against Denver. I mean, but you were the guy that gave them the win. I mean, don't. I mean, this is you. This is
I know
you
this
are
is
riding
my
the ship.
moment. I'll give the Raiders the win. I think they might. It all depends. It's on their shoulders, man. Do they want to get the job done? They should, because I think this team. I mean, their schedule. I mean, it's tough. I don't know how they got a really tough schedule though. I mean, you're playing the NFC West. I feel kind of bad for the Raiders in that kind of sense, because you have to go against your own AFC West and an NFC West, and you're the worst team out of those two divisions. That's hard. It's so hard. It's tough. I feel bad for the Raiders this year. They just have too much of a tough schedule.
That's true. It's pretty tough hearing you complain about the Raiders, though.
Hey, you know what? The Raiders aren't that bad, all right? I said I love Khalil Mack. You know what? I just said that right now. I love Khalil Mack. I think he was the best pick in the draft. Said it.
Go ahead and.
I said it.
Yeah.
That's all I have to say. Best pick in the draft.
Best pick in the draft, huh?
And you agreed with that too.
That's true.
You said out of all those first round picks, you said Khalil Mack is gonna have the most success.
Hall of Famer, dog.
Hall of Famer. Is he gonna be a Hall of Famer for the Oakland Raiders though?
That's too early to tell.
Too early to tell. Well, we're gonna wrap up the show here. Nick, another great show as always. How much teams are we? We're like 15 teams away from being done, right?
Correct. 17 down.
17 down, and Nick, we gotta give our fans the next team here. Who is it?
The next team is the Washington Redskins.
The Washington Redskins, could they be a playoff team this year? RG3 looking for answers as he got Deshaun Jackson this season. He still has Alfred Morris, who's considered a top 10 running back in this league. The defense struggled last season. Did they do anything to improve it? Well, you'll find out next time when you tune into NFL Team Breakdowns. I'm Robert Jeter, alongside me, Nick Rice. We want to thank you for listening in once again to NFL Team Breakdowns and listening to the Oakland Raiders and see how they do in the AFC West. We still have one more team in the AFC West. We still have the Denver Broncos, who made the Super Bowl, but couldn't really do much about it. But thanks for listening, everyone. I hope you tune in for the Washington Redskins. It should be coming up soon, either by this week or next week. Have a great night, and God bless.